The champagne flute felt cold against my palm as our CEO, Gerald Hoffman, raised his glass across the mahogany conference table. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he looked directly at me. "Let's toast the ones we've replaced," he said, and the room erupted in nervous laughter. I was the only one who knew what he really meant. My finger hovered over my phone beneath the table. Send. The email left my outbox at exactly 9:43 that Friday evening. By Monday morning, everything would change. I arrived at Consolidated Financial Services headquarters at 7:30 Monday morning, my hands trembling as I swiped my badge at the security turnstile. The marble lobby gleamed under recessed lighting, and I could see my reflection in the polished floor. 6 years I'd worked here as Senior Risk Compliance Manager. 6 years of building a reputation as someone thorough, careful, and trustworthy. All of that was about to explode. The elevator ride to my office on the 15th floor felt longer than usual. My heart hammered against my ribcage. The email I'd sent Friday night to Interstate Commerce Bank should have been processed over the weekend. It was a formal notification, as required by my position, that Consolidated Financial Services was engaged in fraudulent wire transfers. I'd cited specific federal banking regulations and my fiduciary duty to report. The bank, legally obligated to investigate, would have frozen our accounts pending investigation. $320 million. Locked tight. I barely had time to set down my coffee when my desk phone rang at 8:15. Gerald's assistant, a woman named Brenda with a voice like crushed ice, demanded I come to the executive floor immediately. No explanation. Just, now, Adriana. The 20th floor was a different world. Thick carpets, muffled footsteps. Original art hung on cream-colored walls. As I stepped off the elevator, I noticed security guards I'd never seen before, standing at attention near the main conference room. My stomach twisted. Inside, 5 people waited around the long glass table. Gerald sat at the head, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. Preston Walsh, our CFO, stood by the window, his back to me. Diane Sutherland, General Counsel, sat rigidly in her chair, a leather portfolio open before her, and 2 men in expensive charcoal suits, strangers, occupied the seats nearest the door. "Miss Castellano," one of the strangers said, rising to his feet. "I'm Howard Blackwell, Senior Counsel for Interstate Commerce Bank." He held up a stack of printed pages. "I believe you're familiar with this correspondence." My email. Every word I'd written printed out in black and white. "Sit down," Gerald said quietly. That calm tone frightened me more than shouting would have. I took a chair, willing my voice to stay steady. I sent that email in accordance with my responsibilities as Risk Compliance Manager. I discovered irregularities in our wire transfer protocols and had a legal obligation to report them. Preston finally turned from the window. His jaw was so tight I could see the muscle twitching. He picked up one of the printed pages and read aloud, his voice dripping with contempt. "On Thursday, November 2nd, I discovered evidence that Consolidated Financial Services has been routing client investment funds through unauthorized shell corporations to avoid regulatory oversight. These transfers violate federal banking laws and constitute fraud. As Risk Compliance Manager, I am legally required to report this activity immediately." He slapped the paper down on the table. "You just froze $320 million of operational capital. Adriana, do you understand what you've done?" "I understand that someone at this company has been stealing from our clients," I said. My voice shook, but I pressed on. "I found the documents Thursday afternoon. Transfers going to companies that don't exist, routed through accounts in the Cayman Islands. Someone has been siphoning money for at least 2 years. And you thought the appropriate response was to sabotage this entire organization?" Diane asked, her tone sharp. "I thought the appropriate response was to follow the law." Gerald leaned forward. "Tell me, Adriana, when exactly did you discover these alleged irregularities?" "Thursday afternoon. Around 3. Interesting timing, he said softly. Because that's also when you found out about Craig Donovan, isn't it? My blood went cold. Craig Donovan. My replacement. I'd overheard Brenda on the phone Thursday, scheduling his start date. 2 weeks from now, he'd be sitting at my desk, doing my job. I was being phased out. This has nothing to do with that, I said. Doesn't it? Gerald smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. A disgruntled employee, about to be let go, decides to burn down the company on her way out. That's what this looks like, Adriana. Howard Blackwell cleared his throat. Mr. Hoffman, the bank has reviewed Miss Castellano's allegations. We're required by law to investigate. The freeze will remain in place until we complete our audit. How long? Preston demanded. 3 to 6 weeks, potentially longer depending on what we find. This will destroy us, Preston said. Payroll is due Friday. We have vendor payments, client obligations. You can't just freeze everything. We've released $10 million for immediate operational needs, Howard said. But the bulk of your funds will remain frozen until this matter is resolved. Diane opened her portfolio and slid a document across the table to Howard. You should see this before you proceed with your investigation. Howard picked up the paper, his expression neutral as he read. Then he looked at me, and I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. What is that? I asked. Diane's voice was cool and professional. It's a signature authorization form, dated August 15th. You approved 3 of the transfers in question, Adriana. Your signature is right there. That's impossible. I never signed anything like that. The signature matches your authorization on file, Diane said. She pulled out another document, laid it beside the first. See for yourself. I stared at the papers. The signature did look like mine. The flowing A, the way the tail of the final letter curved upward. But I'd never seen this form before in my life. This is forged, I said, my voice rising. I never approved those transfers. Gerald stood slowly. You just committed career suicide, Adriana. And possibly actual suicide of another kind, since you've implicated yourself in the very fraud you're reporting. He looked at Howard. My general counsel will cooperate fully with your investigation, but I think you'll find that Miss Castellano has been running a scheme right under our noses. We're as shocked as you are. Howard gathered his papers. We'll be in touch. Don't leave the state, Miss Castellano. Any of you. After he left, Gerald circled the table slowly. 6 years, Adriana. 6 years I trusted you. And this is how you repay that trust? You're setting me up, I whispered. You knew I found the fraud. You're framing me for it. Paranoia is an ugly thing, he said. Clean out your desk. You're suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Security will escort you. As 2 guards appeared in the doorway, I realized with terrible clarity that they'd planned this. Every step. The forged signatures were already in place, waiting. They'd known exactly what I would do, and they'd prepared the trap long before I walked into it. By Monday afternoon, the news had spread through the financial district like wildfire. The bank released a carefully worded statement about freezing Consolidated's accounts pending a fraud investigation. They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. Within hours, my phone started buzzing with texts and calls from colleagues, most of them carefully worded variations of, "What happened?" I spent Monday evening in my home office, surrounded by the documents I'd managed to print before my computer access was revoked. Bank statements, wire transfer records, incorporation papers for shell companies with names like Apex Holdings and Summit Ventures. Real companies don't have addresses that trace back to UPS stores in strip malls. My husband Jake came home at 6, still wearing his tie from teaching at the high school. Our daughter Sophie was at soccer practice. He found me at my desk, staring at spreadsheets. "Tell me what's happening," he said quietly. I explained everything. The fraud I'd discovered, the email to the bank, the forged signatures. Jake listened, his teacher face on, the one he used when a student was explaining why they hadn't done their homework. So you reported a crime and they're framing you for it, he summarized. Yes, what do we do? I loved him for that. I need a lawyer, a good one. How much is this going to cost? That was the question, wasn't it? Our savings account had maybe $20,000. A fraud case could burn through that in a week. I don't know. The doorbell rang at 7:30. Jake answered it while I was upstairs changing. I heard male voices, formal and clipped, and my heart sank, even before Jake called up to me. 2 FBI agents stood in our living room, badges out, expressions professionally neutral. Agent Timothy Brennan did the talking. Mrs. Castellano, we need to ask you some questions about your employment at Consolidated Financial Services. I want a lawyer present, I said immediately. That's your right. But you should know that Gerald Hoffman has filed a formal complaint alleging that you embezzled funds from client accounts. We need to examine your personal finances, your computers, your phone records. We can do this the easy way with your cooperation. Or we can get warrants. The room tilted. I didn't embezzle anything. Then you won't mind if we take a look at your bank records. They spent 2 hours in my house, photographing documents, copying files from my laptop, taking my work phone. Jake stood in the doorway of Sophie's room when she came home from practice, keeping her upstairs while strangers rifled through our lives. After they left, Jake held me while I cried. It's going to be okay, he said. But I could hear the doubt in his voice. Tuesday morning, I called every lawyer I could find who specialized in white-collar criminal defense. Most of them recognized the Consolidated name. Immediately. 3 declined to take my case outright. 2 others quoted retainer fees of $50,000 or more. The 5th, a man named Robert Hayes, who operated out of a small office in Newark, agreed to meet me for a consultation. I also started calling my professional network, people I'd worked with over the years. My old manager from my first job out of college, a woman named Patricia who'd always said I could call her any time. She didn't return my call. A colleague at another firm who'd invited me to be on a panel about regulatory compliance last year. He sent a brief text. Sorry, can't help right now. By Tuesday afternoon, I understood what was happening. Gerald's public relations team was working overtime. Financial news websites already had articles with headlines like Risk Manager Under Investigation for Freezing Own Company's Funds and Consolidated Financial Services Employee Accused of Embezzlement Scheme. My name wasn't in the articles, but anyone in the industry would know who they meant. I was being erased, blacklisted. Every bridge I'd built over 6 years was burning simultaneously. That evening, while Jake was helping Sophie with homework, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a text, but an encrypted messaging app I'd never used before. The app had downloaded itself somehow. The message contained a single photograph. It showed Sophie's elementary school, Benjamin Franklin Elementary, on Oakwood Avenue. The photo was taken from across the street, zoomed in on the playground where kids played during recess. Below the photo, 5 words: cooperate or your daughter learns. My hands went numb. I dropped the phone, picked it up with shaking fingers, stared at the image. Someone had been at my daughter's school. Someone had taken this picture, sent it to me as a threat. Jake found me on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later, hyperventilating. I showed him the message. We're calling the police right now, he said. No. I grabbed his arm. Gerald has connections everywhere. The police chief in our town, he serves on the same charity board as Preston Walsh. We can't trust anyone. Then what do we do? I don't know. I felt like I was drowning. They want me to sign a resignation and retraction. Admit I made everything up. Walk away quietly. And they'll make the criminal charges disappear. And if you don't? I looked at the photo again. Sophie in her purple jacket, laughing with her friend Emma by the swings. Then they heard our daughter. Jake pulled out his phone. I'm calling my mother. We're sending Sophie to Denver. She'll be safe there. For how long? We can't keep her away forever, long enough for you to figure out what to do. He was already dialing. Pack a bag for her. I'll book the flights. By midnight, Sophie was on a plane to Colorado. Confused about why she was missing school. Excited about an unexpected visit to Grandma's house. She had no idea that her mother was a target, that going to school in our town had become dangerous. I had 48 hours to sign the papers or Gerald would escalate. I spent Wednesday morning staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering when I'd lost control of my own life. At noon, my phone rang. Not the encrypted app this time, but a regular call. The number showed a New Jersey area code I didn't recognize. Hello? Adriana Castellano? A woman's voice, tired and sad. My name is Teresa Moreno. I used to work at Consolidated Financial Services. I heard what's happening to you. I think we need to talk. Teresa Moreno had left Consolidated 6 months ago. I remembered her vaguely. A senior analyst who'd worked in the investments division. She'd been there for maybe 3 years before abruptly resigning. No party, no farewell email. One day she was there, the next she was gone. Now she was working at a small credit union in Portland, Oregon, living in an apartment that cost half what she'd been paying in New Jersey, driving a 10-year-old sedan instead of the luxury car she'd leased before. I flew out Wednesday morning using cash I'd withdrawn from an ATM, not wanting to create a digital trail. Jake thought I was meeting with lawyers. I didn't tell him I was crossing the country to meet a stranger who might be my only hope. The coffee shop where Teresa suggested we meet was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nobody noticed strangers. She was waiting in a back corner booth, a thin woman in her mid-30s with dark circles under her eyes. Thank you for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. You said you know what's happening to me. I know because it happened to me. Teresa wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to get warm. 8 months ago, I discovered the same thing you did. Fraudulent transfers, shell corporations, money disappearing from client accounts. I went to Diane Sutherland about it. What did she say? She thanked me for bringing it to her attention, said she'd investigate. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with Gerald and Preston. They had documents showing that I'd been accessing client accounts without authorization. They said I was stealing money from disabled clients' retirement funds. My stomach turned. Were you? Of course not. But they had evidence. Bank records, authorization forms with my signature, transaction logs from my computer. Everything you'd need to prove I was a thief. It was all fabricated. Every piece of it. But try proving that when the CEO and CFO of a major financial services firm are swearing you're guilty. I had 2 choices. Resign immediately and sign a non-disclosure agreement, or they'd file criminal charges and destroy my career. I chose resignation. I figured at least I'd stay out of prison. Why did they let you go? I asked. Why not just fire you? Because then I could have filed wrongful termination suits, demanded Discovery. This way, I voluntarily resigned and signed away my right to sue them. They gave me 3-month severance and made me promise never to speak about anything I'd seen at Consolidated. But you kept evidence. Teresa pulled a thumb drive from her purse, set it on the table between us. I made copies before they revoked my access. Everything I found about the shell corporations, the transfers, the whole scheme. I've been sitting on it for months, too scared to do anything. They told me if I ever spoke up, they'd come after me for the theft charges. Said they had all the evidence locked away, ready to file. Why are you telling me this now? Because you actually did something. You reported them to the bank. You didn't just run away like I did. She pushed the thumb drive toward me. This has transaction records going back 3 years. It shows that Preston Walsh created the shell corporations. Gerald approved every major transfer. They've been stealing from clients for at least that long. Probably longer. I picked up the drive, felt its weight in my palm. How much? Best I can tell. About $12 million total. It was worse than I'd thought. I need to get this to the FBI. Be careful. These people are ruthless. And they have friends everywhere. Teresa stood to leave. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. Maybe if I'd spoken up when it happened to me, you wouldn't be in this position now. You're speaking up now. That takes courage. She shook her head. Courage would have been refusing to sign their papers. What I did was survival. There's a difference. I flew back to Newark that evening. The thumb drive was in my jacket pocket. Copies uploaded to 3 different secure cloud storage accounts. I had proof now. Real evidence that could clear my name and send Gerald and Preston to prison where they belonged. Jake was waiting when I got home at 9. Where were you really? Oregon. Meeting someone who can help. Without telling me? I didn't want you to worry. I'm your husband, Adriana. We're supposed to face this together. He was angry, the kind of quiet anger that felt like disappointment. I'm trying to protect you and Sophie. By lying to me? We argued for an hour. The kind of circular fight that doesn't solve anything but leaves both people feeling worse. He slept in the guest room that night. In the morning, he left for school without saying goodbye. I spent Thursday making copies of Teresa's documents, organizing them into a coherent timeline of fraud. Preston had set up the first shell corporation 3 years ago. Gerald had approved the first fraudulent transfer 6 months later. They'd been systematically stealing from clients ever since, a few $100,000 at a time. Amounts small enough that nobody noticed the discrepancies. Until I'd noticed. At 4 in the afternoon, I met Robert Hayes, the lawyer who'd agreed to represent me. He reviewed the documents, his expression growing grimmer with each page. This is good, he finally said. Really good. We can take this to the FBI. Maybe get you immunity in exchange for cooperation. Can we do it tomorrow? Let me make some calls first. I want to coordinate with the prosecutor's office. Make sure we approach this the right way. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in days. I had evidence. I had a lawyer. I had a path forward. I got home at 6 to find the house empty. Jake's car wasn't in the driveway. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Jake's mother in Denver. She answered on the 3rd ring. Helen, is Jake there? He is. He and Sophie arrived about 2 hours ago. My heart stopped. Sophie's with him? Yes, dear. Jake said the 2 of you decided it would be better if she stayed here for a while. Is everything all right? I assured her everything was fine, hung up, tried Jake's phone again. This time he answered. Where are you? I demanded. With our daughter. Where I should be. Jake, what's happening? His voice was cold, distant. Someone sent me documents today. Bank statements. An account in your name at Eastern Fidelity Bank. 20 deposits over the past 3 months, totaling $200,000. Money taken from Consolidated's client accounts. That's not real. Jake, they're setting me up. Just like they did to Teresa. Who's Teresa? The woman I met in Oregon. She worked at Consolidated. They did the same thing to her. You're not making sense. I don't know what's true anymore. He was quiet for a moment. My lawyer says I should file for emergency custody, that you're under federal investigation and you could be a danger to Sophie. Your lawyer? Jake, when did you get a lawyer? Yesterday. Someone called me. Said they were concerned about Sophie's welfare given everything that's happening. They recommended I speak to an attorney. He paused. Adriana, I want to believe you, but there's so much evidence, and you're lying to me, disappearing without explanation. How am I supposed to trust you? Please don't do this. Don't take Sophie away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm keeping her safe. There's a difference. He hung up. I called back 5 times. He didn't answer. At midnight, my phone buzzed with the encrypted messaging app. Same unknown number as before. Final chance. Monday morning at Consolidated. 9 o'clock. Sign the papers, or your daughter never comes home. Attached was another photo. This one showed Jake's mother's house in Denver, taken from the street. Sophie's purple jacket visible through the living room window. They'd followed Jake and Sophie across the country. They were watching my family right now, 2,000 miles away, and there was nothing I could do to stop them. I sat in my empty house and cried until I had no tears left. Then I opened my laptop and started writing my resignation letter. Friday morning felt like moving through mud. Every action took tremendous effort. Getting dressed, making coffee, driving to Robert Hayes's office in Newark. The resignation letter was in my purse, unsigned. I had until Monday to make a decision that would determine the rest of my life. Robert's receptionist told me he was with another client but would be free in 20 minutes. I sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine without seeing the words. The door to Robert's office opened. A man in a navy suit stepped out, shook Robert's hand, then turned toward the exit. Our eyes met. He froze. I knew that face. I'd seen it in the LinkedIn profile I'd researched 2 weeks ago. Craig Donovan, my replacement at Consolidated. Miss Castellano, he said carefully. What are you doing here? I asked. Robert appeared in his doorway. Adriana, you're early. Mr. Donovan and I were just finishing up. You know each other? Craig asked. She's my client, Robert said. Craig's expression shifted through several emotions rapidly. Surprise, concern, calculation. We should talk. All three of us. In Robert's office, with the door closed, Craig sat across from me and said something I didn't expect. I work for the Securities and Exchange Commission. I stared at him. You're supposed to start at Consolidated in 10 days. I was. As part of an undercover investigation. He glanced at Robert, who nodded permission for him to continue. The SEC has been building a case against Consolidated Financial Services for 14 months. We received multiple whistleblower complaints about fraudulent activity. I was placed there as an investigator, hired on as your replacement to give me access to the risk management systems. Then you know Gerald and Preston are stealing from clients. We know. We've been documenting everything, building an airtight case. Wire fraud, securities fraud, bank fraud. We were maybe 6 weeks away from making arrests. He leaned forward. And then you sent that email to Interstate Commerce Bank. Understanding crashed over me like a wave. I interfered with your investigation. You didn't know. But yes, your email tipped them off that someone was onto them. Gerald and Preston have been destroying evidence for the past 4 days. They've moved money, deleted files, covered their tracks. You forced their hand and ours. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Craig pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. The SEC wants you to testify. We need someone on the inside who can speak to the documents you found, corroborate our evidence. We're offering you immunity from prosecution in exchange for your cooperation. It sounded too good to be true. What's the catch? Craig and Robert exchanged a look. Robert spoke first. The immunity process takes about 6 months to finalize. During that time, you'd be vulnerable. Vulnerable how? Gerald Hoffman has powerful connections, Craig said bluntly. Political connections, law enforcement connections, legal connections. The SEC can offer you immunity from federal prosecution, but we can't protect you from retaliation. We don't have the resources for witness protection, especially not for someone who isn't testifying in a mob case. So I just have to hope he doesn't hurt me or my family for the next 6 months. We'd do what we could, Craig said. But honestly, you'd be on your own. The resignation letter in my purse felt heavier. How long until trial? Assuming we can salvage the case? 18 months? Maybe 2 years? Federal cases move slowly. 2 years of looking over my shoulder. 2 years of wondering if every car following me was a threat. 2 years of keeping Sophie away from her home, her school, her friends. There's something else you need to know, Craig said quietly. The $320 million that Interstate Commerce Bank froze? Those were decoy accounts. Gerald has been moving the real stolen money for months. We estimate he's got about $80 million in offshore accounts that we can't touch. Your email accomplished something. It put pressure on them, but it didn't stop them. The money's gone. I felt like I'd been punched. Everything I did was for nothing. Not nothing. You tried to do the right thing. You just didn't know the full picture. Craig stood to leave. Think about the immunity offer, but decide quickly. The longer you wait, the more evidence Gerald destroys. After he left, I sat in Robert's office feeling hollow. What should I do? That's not a question I can answer, Robert said. But I'll tell you this. Testifying will make you a target for years. Not testifying means Gerald walks away from this with $80 million and the freedom to do it again to someone else. I drove home through Friday afternoon traffic, my phone silent. Jake wasn't calling. Sophie was in Denver, probably playing in the snow, unaware that her mother's life was disintegrating. My house felt too big, too empty. I wandered from room to room, remembering better times. Sophie's artwork on the refrigerator, Jake's history books stacked on the coffee table, wedding photos on the mantel. The doorbell rang at 6. I almost didn't answer, afraid of what new disaster waited on my doorstep. It was a courier with an envelope. Inside, custody papers. Jake's emergency petition to keep Sophie in Colorado, away from me, until the criminal investigation was resolved. Signed by a judge that morning. I was officially losing my daughter. My bank called at 7. The FBI investigation had triggered a freeze on my personal accounts pending review. I couldn't access my own money. The mortgage payment was due in 5 days. I had maybe $300 in cash. At 9, my laptop pinged with an email. My therapist from 4 years ago, Dr. Ellen Shapiro, whom I'd seen after my mother died from cancer. Someone had submitted a request for my medical records. The records had been subpoenaed by Consolidated's legal team. They were going to use my grief, my anxiety after losing my mother, as evidence that I was mentally unstable, dangerous, unfit to be around my own child. I sat on my couch and thought about running, taking my cash, getting in my car, driving until I hit a border. Canada, maybe. Somewhere Gerald couldn't reach me. But running meant leaving Sophie. Abandoning any chance of clearing my name. Letting Gerald win. At midnight, an email arrived from an encrypted account I'd never seen before. Subject: You're not the only one. The message contained a link to a secure server. I clicked it, half expecting a virus. But what appeared on my screen was worse than any malware. Testimony. 4 separate documents. 4 different women. Jennifer Hartley, who'd worked at Consolidated 7 years ago. Fired after discovering accounting irregularities. Accused of theft. Threatened with prosecution. Forced to resign. Lauren Phillips. 5 years ago. Same pattern. Found fraud. Reported it internally. Was framed and discredited. Samantha Burke. 3 years ago. Discovered Preston's shell corporations. Tried to blow the whistle. Ended up with fabricated evidence of embezzlement against her. And Teresa Moreno's story, more detailed than what she'd told me. All of them senior managers. All of them women. All of them systematically destroyed by Gerald Hoffman when they got too close to the truth. The email included a note at the bottom. We've been watching. We've been collecting evidence. You were brave enough to act. Now we're ready to help you finish it. But you need to trust us. Reply yes, if you're willing to take one more risk. I stared at the screen. This could be another trap. Gerald could be behind it. testing me, seeing if I'd reach out to potential co-conspirators. But what did I have to lose? My marriage was crumbling. My daughter was 2,000 miles away. My bank accounts were frozen. My reputation was destroyed. Federal investigators wanted me to risk my life for testimony. And in 3 days, I was supposed to walk into Consolidated and sign away my integrity to save myself. I typed one word. Yes. The response came immediately. Monday morning, 5 a.m., Riverside Diner on Route 40. 6 in New Jersey. Come alone. Park and back. We'll find you. I had no idea who I was meeting. No idea if this was salvation or destruction. But I'd already lost everything that mattered. Maybe it was time to bet what little I had left. Saturday passed in a blur of phone calls that went nowhere. I tried reaching Jake a dozen times. His mother answered once. Her voice, apologetic, told me Jake had asked her not to put me through. I could hear Sophie laughing in the background, oblivious to the war being fought over her future. Tell her I love her, I said. Of course, dear, Helen replied, and hung up. My lawyer, Robert, called with bad news. The custody filing wasn't just a formality. Jake had signed an affidavit stating that I'd become erratic, secretive, possibly dangerous. He cited the federal investigation, my trip to Oregon that I'd lied about, my refusal to explain where I'd gotten the mysterious evidence against Consolidated. The judge had granted a temporary order. Sophie would stay in Colorado until a hearing could be scheduled in 30 days. 30 days, an eternity. Can we fight it? I asked. We can try. But Adriana, the evidence Jake presented is compelling. You are under federal investigation. You did lie to him, and with your therapy records about to surface, showing you were treated for anxiety and depression 4 years ago, opposing counsel will paint you as unstable. I was grieving my mother. That's normal. I know. But they'll twist it. They're good at that. I spent Saturday afternoon calling the few credit cards that weren't maxed out, begging for advances. I managed to get $800 transferred before they caught on and froze those accounts too. The mortgage company had a recording informing me that payment was now 5 days overdue. Sunday morning, I sat in my empty house and wrote letters. One to Sophie, explaining everything, to be opened when she was old enough to understand. One to Jake, apologizing for the lies, begging him to believe me. One to my sister in California, asking her to take care of Sophie if something happened to me. Dramatic, maybe. But I was meeting strangers in a diner parking lot at 5 in the morning, and I'd learned the hard way that nothing was safe anymore. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. Not the encrypted app this time, but a regular text from a number I didn't recognize. The message contained 3 photos. The first showed Sophie at a playground in Denver, pushing herself on a swing. The second showed Jake's mother's car in a grocery store parking lot. The third was a close-up of their house number, 847. Below the photos. Monday morning, 9 a.m. At Consolidated. Final warning. I sat on my bathroom floor and felt the full weight of my situation crash down. They were watching my family right now. 2,000 miles away. Someone was following Sophie and Jake and Helen, documenting their movements, taking pictures to prove they could reach them any time. Jake called that evening. I grabbed the phone so fast I almost dropped it. Adriana. His voice was strained. I need to ask you something. And I need the truth. Anything. Did you steal money from Consolidated? No. I swear to you, no. Then explain the bank account. Eastern Fidelity. Your name on it. $200,000 in deposits over 3 months. It's fabricated. Gerald set it up to frame me, just like he framed Teresa and the others. What others? I told him about Jennifer, Lauren, Samantha, the pattern of women who'd discovered fraud and been destroyed for it. He listened in silence. Jake. They're threatening Sophie. They sent me photos of her in Denver. They know where you are. I saw someone following us yesterday, he said quietly. A man in a gray sedan. He was outside Sophie's school, then at the grocery store, then parked across from Mom's house. I thought I was being paranoid. You're not. They're watching you to control me. Then what do we do? I'm working on it. There are people helping me. Women who Gerald hurt before. We're meeting tomorrow morning. I think we have a way to stop him. You think? I'm doing the best I can. He was quiet for a long time. I want to believe you. But they sent me evidence, Adriana. Documents with your signature. Bank records with your name. How do I know what's real? Because you know me. You've known me for 12 years. Have I ever stolen anything? Have I ever lied about anything important before this? You lied about Oregon, to protect you. If you'd known where I was going, they could have used it against you. Or maybe you're really good at lying and I'm just now figuring that out. The line went dead. He'd hung up. I called back. No answer. I sent a text. Please don't give up on me. No response. Sunday night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every car that passed on the street might be someone watching. At 3 a.m., I gave up trying and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the clock count down to 5. At 4:30, I got in my car and drove to Route 46. The Riverside Diner was a classic stainless steel railcar-style building with red vinyl booths visible through steamed-up windows. I parked in back as instructed, my headlights illuminating empty pavement. At exactly 5, a dark SUV pulled in beside me. 3 women got out. I recognized the first one immediately from the photo in her testimony. Jennifer Hartley. She was maybe 40, with short blonde hair and eyes that had seen too much. The second woman, Lauren Phillips, was tall and athletic, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. The third, Samantha Burke, looked youngest, probably early 30s, with red hair and freckles across her nose. Jennifer tapped on my window. I got out, my breath fogging in the cold November air. You came, Jennifer said. I didn't have much choice. You always have a choice. You chose to fight back instead of disappearing. That's why we're here. We went inside the diner, took a booth in the far corner. A tired waitress brought coffee without asking. The place was nearly empty. Just us and a truck driver at the counter reading a newspaper. I need to know who you are, I said. How you found me. What you want. Lauren spoke first. We're exactly who we said we are. Women Gerald Hoffman destroyed. We've spent years hiding, afraid to speak up because he threatened us into silence. So why now? Because you did what we couldn't, Samantha said. You reported him officially. You got the bank involved. You forced this into the open. We've been waiting for someone brave enough to take the first shot. Jennifer pulled out a tablet, opened a file. We've been collecting evidence for 6 years. Every document we could save before they fired us. Every email, every transfer record, every piece of communication that proves the fraud. We've been building a case, waiting for the right moment. Why didn't you go to the authorities yourselves? Because they made us complicit, Lauren said bitterly. Just like they did to you. They forged our signatures, created false evidence that we were part of the scheme. If we'd gone to the SEC, we'd have been arrested alongside Gerald. We needed someone clean, someone whose hands weren't dirty with their fabrications. But I'm not clean. They forged my signature too. Not until after you reported them, Jennifer said. That's the difference. You went to Interstate Commerce Bank first, before they could set you up. Your email is time-stamped Thursday night. The forged documents with your signature weren't created until Friday morning. We have proof. How? Samantha smiled grimly. Because Teresa was still in the system Friday morning. She forwarded us copies of the documents before they revoked her access. We know exactly when those forgeries were created and who created them. Preston's digital signature is all over the metadata. I felt something crack inside me. Hope, maybe. Or just the last piece of my resistance breaking. What's the plan? For the next hour, they laid it out. Teresa hadn't just given me that thumb drive by chance. She'd been working with these women for months. The evidence I had, combined with what they'd collected over the years, painted a complete picture of Gerald's fraud scheme. But more than that, they had recordings. Lauren had placed listening devices in Gerald's office before she was fired. Tiny microphones disguised as decorative items that nobody had ever found. Those devices had captured 3 years of conversations, including Gerald and Preston discussing the fraud, planning how to frame various employees, coordinating their cover-up. "You bugged his office?" I said. "That's illegal. So is embezzling $80 million, Lauren replied. "We're past worrying about legal niceties. Craig Donovan, the SEC investigator, has been helping us," Jennifer continued. "Not officially. The SEC doesn't know about us. But Craig's been feeding information both ways. He knew you were going to send that email to the bank. He wanted it to happen. He said I ruined his investigation. He lied. Or at least, he bent the truth. Your email was always part of the plan. We needed the money frozen. Needed Gerald to panic and make mistakes. Craig couldn't orchestrate that himself without compromising his cover, but you could. I felt dizzy, so I was manipulated. You used me. We gave you the opportunity to do the right thing," Jennifer said quietly. "Everything you did, you chose to do. We just made sure the pieces were in place for your choice to matter. Why didn't you tell me? Because we needed your reaction to be genuine. If Gerald suspected you were working with anyone, he'd have been more careful. This way, you were authentically terrified, authentically alone. He believed he was in control. He is in control. He's threatening my daughter. He's turned my husband against me. He's destroyed my life." Samantha leaned forward. "That's why we're here. Monday morning, you're going to walk into Consolidated like they expect. You're going to sit down at that conference table with Gerald and Preston and Diane. And you're going to play the last card we've been saving for 6 years." "What card?" Jennifer smiled. And it was the most savage expression I'd ever seen. "Checkmate." They explained the rest of the plan. It was risky, maybe illegal in places, and absolutely terrifying. But it was also the only way to win. At 6:30, we left the diner. The sun was rising over New Jersey, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful. If you ignored the fact that in less than 3 hours, I'd be walking into a room full of people who wanted to destroy me. Jennifer handed me a tiny device, no bigger than a button. "Keep this in your pocket. It's a recorder. Everything that happens in that room will be captured." "What about the evidence? The recordings you already have?" "We're giving all of it to the FBI this morning. But we need one more piece." Gerald confessing. His voice, on tape, admitting what he's done to you. That's the final nail. I drove home as the city woke up around me. My phone buzzed with a message from Jake. "I don't know what to believe anymore." I typed back, "Watch the news Monday afternoon. You'll understand everything." At 9, I stood in my closet trying to decide what you wear to your own execution or resurrection. I settled on a navy suit, professional and forgettable. At 8:45, I got in my car and drove to Consolidated Financial Services for what might be the last time. The security guards at the front desk watched me walk through the lobby. Everyone knew. The whispers followed me to the elevator. I rode to the 20th floor, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Gerald's assistant, Brenda, was waiting by the conference room. "They're ready for you." I walked in. The conference room looked exactly as it had the previous Monday. Same glass table, same leather chairs, same view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. But everything felt different now. I wasn't walking into an ambush. I was walking into a trap I'd helped set. Gerald sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed in his charcoal suit. Preston stood by the window again, but this time his nervousness showed. Diane had a stack of papers in front of her, my resignation and retraction already prepared. A notary sat in the corner, a middle-aged woman in a gray dress, there to witness my surrender. "Adriana," Gerald said pleasantly, "please, sit." I took the chair directly across from him, my hands folded in my lap. The recording device Jennifer had given me was in my jacket pocket, silently capturing everything. "I assume you've had time to think about your situation," Gerald continued. "I have. And you understand what's at stake? Your daughter's safety, your freedom, your husband's trust." He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. "I understand." Diane slid the papers across to me. "This is a voluntary resignation. It states that you acted rashly, without sufficient evidence. When you sent that email to Interstate Commerce Bank, you acknowledge that your allegations were unfounded. You agree to cooperate fully with Consolidated's legal team, and you release the company from any liability related to your termination." I picked up the pages, pretended to read them. "And in exchange? In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges," Preston said from the window. "The evidence against you disappears. You walk away with your freedom. What about my reputation?" "My career?" Gerald smiled. "Reputation can be rebuilt. A prison sentence can't be undone." I set down the papers. "I have a question first." "Of course. How many others were there before me?" Gerald's smile didn't falter. "I don't know what you mean. Women who worked here, who discovered what you were doing, who you destroyed to keep them quiet." I kept my voice calm, conversational. "Was it just Teresa? Or were there more?" "You're upset," Diane said smoothly. "That's understandable. But making wild accusations won't help your situation." "I'm not making accusations. I'm asking a question." I looked directly at Gerald. "Jennifer Hartley, Lauren Phillips, Samantha Burke. Should I keep going? I, make, I, Ray, I. Something flickered in Gerald's eyes. Surprise, quickly hidden. "Those women resigned of their own accord," he said carefully. "After you framed them for fraud. After you threatened them. After you made sure they could never work in finance again." Preston moved away from the window. "You need to sign those papers, Adriana." "Or what? You'll hurt my daughter? You'll send more photos of her school?" "We've never threatened your daughter," Diane said sharply. I pulled out my phone, brought up the encrypted messages, held the screen so they could see, then explained these. Gerald barely glanced at them. "Those could have come from anyone. You could have sent them to yourself." "Could have, but didn't." I put my phone away. "Here's what I think happened. You've been running this fraud scheme for years. Client money disappearing into shell corporations, funds siphoned offshore, probably $80 million or more. When women on your staff got close to discovering it, you set them up. Forged documents, fake evidence, threats. You're good at it. You've had a lot of practice." "This is paranoid fantasy," Preston said. But his voice shook. "Is it? Then why did you create those shell corporations, Preston? Apex Holdings, Summit Ventures, Cascade Investments. 8 companies total, all registered in Delaware, all with addresses that trace back to empty offices." His face went pale. "And Gerald, why did you approve those wire transfers personally? You usually delegate that authority. But for these particular transactions, you signed off every time. Your digital signature is all over them." "How do you know that?" Diane demanded. "Because I'm good at my job. I was good at it when you hired me, and I'm still good at it now." I pulled the thumb drive Teresa had given me from my pocket, set it on the table. This has 3 years of transaction records. Every fraudulent transfer, every shell corporation, every stolen dollar. Gerald finally moved, reaching for the drive, but I was faster. I pulled it back. I've already made copies. Dozens of them. Even if you destroy this one, the evidence exists. Then why are you here? Gerald asked quietly. If you have all this proof, why come to us? Because I wanted to hear you admit it. I leaned forward. I wanted you to look me in the eye and confess what you did. Not just to me, but to Jennifer and Lauren and Samantha and Teresa. All of us. The room went very still. Gerald stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. You're wearing a wire. Does it matter? It matters because anything recorded without consent isn't admissible in court. Maybe. Maybe not. I guess we'll find out. I stood up. I'm not signing your papers, Gerald. I'm not going quietly. I'm not letting you win. Preston lunged across the table, grabbing for my jacket, trying to find the recorder. I stumbled back, but Diane was there, surprisingly fast, her hand closing on my wrist. The door opened. FBI agents poured into the room, 6 of them, weapons drawn. Federal agents? Nobody move. Everyone froze. Agent Timothy Brennan, the same agent who'd searched my house days earlier, stepped forward. Gerald Hoffman, Preston Walsh, Diane Sutherland. You're under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering, and extortion. They read the Miranda rights while handcuffing all 3 of them. Preston was shouting about lawyers. Diane stood silent, her face ashen. Gerald just stared at me. You planned this, he said. Not alone, but yes, you'll never make it stick. We have the best lawyers money can buy. You had the best lawyers money could steal. There's a difference. Craig Donovan walked in, his SEC badge visible on his belt. Behind him came Jennifer, Lauren, and Samantha, the women Gerald had destroyed, now watching him be led away in handcuffs. Miss Castellano, Agent Brennan said, turning to me. Here it comes, I thought. The catch. The trap I'd missed. We need you to come with us as well. My stomach dropped. What? You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and interfering with a federal investigation. Your email to Interstate Commerce Bank, while well-intentioned, violated SEC protocols and compromised an ongoing investigation. What? No. Craig, you said this was the plan. Craig looked genuinely apologetic. I said your email was part of the plan. I never said there wouldn't be consequences. They handcuffed me. The metal bit into my wrists, cold and unforgiving. This is insane, Jennifer said. She helped you catch them. And she also committed a crime doing it, Agent Brennan said. The law doesn't have exceptions for good intentions. They led me out alongside Gerald, Preston, and Diane. 4 of us in handcuffs, walking through Consolidated's lobby while employees stared. The difference was that Gerald looked smug, confident his lawyers would save him. I just felt betrayed. Outside, separate vehicles waited. They put Gerald and Preston in one, Diane in another, me in a third. As they closed the door, Craig leaned in through the window. It's not what you think. Trust me. This is temporary. How temporary? 72 hours. Maybe less. Just hold on. The car pulled away, taking me toward a future I couldn't see. They kept me in federal custody for exactly 72 hours. 3 days in a holding cell, sleeping on a thin mattress, eating food that tasted like cardboard, wondering if I'd traded one disaster for another. Robert Hayes visited on the 2nd day. The prosecutor is reviewing your case. Craig Donovan has submitted a detailed report explaining your role. It looks good, Adriana. Looks good? I'm in jail. You're in temporary custody. There's a difference. He set down his briefcase, pulled out papers. The evidence you helped collect is solid. Gerald, Preston, and Diane have all been formally charged. The fraud scheme was bigger than anyone thought. $112 million over 7 years, not $80 million. They've recovered $93 million from offshore accounts so far. What about the charges against me? The prosecutor is declining to press them. Your email, while unorthodox, was within your legal rights as risk compliance manager. You had a duty to report suspected fraud. The obstruction claim can't hold up because you acted in good faith with genuine evidence. I closed my eyes, felt tears building. So I'm free? You will be. Tomorrow morning, probably. They released me at 10 a.m. on Thursday. I walked out of the federal building in downtown Newark wearing the same navy suit I'd worn Monday morning, rumpled now and smelling of institutional soap. Jennifer, Lauren, and Samantha were waiting on the courthouse steps. You did it, Jennifer said, hugging me. We did it, I corrected. A car pulled up at the curb. Jake got out, and my heart stopped. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hair uncombed. But he was smiling. Hey, he said. Hey, I saw the news. All of it. Craig called me. Explained everything. He stepped closer. I'm so sorry. For not believing you. For taking Sophie away. For everything. You were protecting our daughter. I was scared. There's a difference. He pulled me into his arms, and I started crying for real, sobbing against his shoulder while he held me. Sophie burst out of the car, her purple jacket bright in the November Sunday mama. I scooped her up, held her tight, breathed in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. I missed you so much, baby. Daddy said you were fighting bad guys, like a superhero. Something like that. Did you win? I looked over her head at Jake, at the 3 women who'd stood with me, at the federal building where Gerald Hoffman was being arraigned. Yeah, sweetheart. We won. The legal aftermath took months. Gerald, Preston, and Diane all rejected plea deals, insisted on going to trial. They lost. Gerald got 15 years in federal prison. Preston got 12. Diane got 8. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings damning. The pattern of fraud undeniable. The 4 women Gerald had destroyed before me all received settlements from Consolidated's insurance company. Not enough to make up for what they'd lost. But something. Recognition, at least, that they'd been wronged. Teresa Moreno moved back to New Jersey. Started working as a consultant for the FBI's white-collar crime division. She had expertise they needed, and they finally believed her. Interstate Commerce Bank offered me a position as their vice president of risk management. The salary was $200,000 a year, nearly double what I'd made at Consolidated. I accepted. My marriage with Jake survived, but it took work. Counseling sessions every week, learning to rebuild trust, understanding that secrets, even ones kept with good intentions, cause damage. We're better now than we were before, stronger in some ways, more fragile in others. Sophie returned to school, oblivious to most of what had happened. She knows her mother helped catch bad guys. That's enough for now. When she's older, I'll tell her the full story. How sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. How speaking up against injustice means risking yourself. How courage isn't the absence of fear but acting despite it. Jennifer, Lauren, Samantha and I formed a consulting firm, Sentinel Group. We specialize in corporate ethics investigations, helping companies identify fraud before it destroys lives. We're expensive, but we're good. Our expertise comes from experience, the kind you can't learn in any classroom. 6 months after Gerald's arrest, I testified before Congress about whistleblower protections in the financial industry. The existing laws were weak, full of loopholes that let companies destroy people who spoke up. My testimony helped pass new legislation, stronger protections for employees who report fraud. I've become a speaker, traveling to business schools and corporate conferences, telling my story, not for the attention, but because every time I speak, someone approaches me afterward. Another woman, usually, whispering about irregularities at her company, afraid to speak up, afraid of what happened to me. I tell them the same thing every time. Staying silent to protect yourself means others will suffer. Speaking up might cost everything, but silence costs your soul. Today, I'm sitting in Interstate Commerce Bank's executive conference room, presenting a new fraud detection system to the leadership team. My phone buzzes during a break. It's a message from Jennifer. Another situation. Financial services firm in Boston. Woman just reached out to us. Same pattern as Consolidated. Can you help? I look at the message. Think about Gerald in prison. About the women he destroyed. About my daughter learning that her mother fought back. I text back. Absolutely. I'm in. Because that's what we do now. We're the ones who stand up. The ones who refuse to be silenced. The ones who fight back when corporations think they can destroy people without consequences. Gerald thought he could replace me. Eliminate me. Erase me like I'd never existed. His toast that Friday night was meant to intimidate, to remind me I was disposable. Instead, he sealed his own fate. That email I sent, finger hovering over my phone beneath the conference table, wasn't my destruction. It was his. The real checkmate wasn't freezing the $320 million. It was refusing to play by his rules. It was choosing to act even when acting meant risking everything. I learned something through all of this. A lesson that cost me my job, my reputation, my marriage's stability, and 3 days in federal custody. But it was worth it. You might lose battles. You might lose almost everything. But refusing to surrender means you can still win the war. And when you stand up, you give others permission to stand with you. The most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silenced. The second most powerful thing is helping others find their voice. I raise my coffee cup to my reflection in the conference room window, a private toast, remembering Gerald's words. To the ones who fight back, I whisper, and I get back to work. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where speaking up about something wrong meant risking everything? What choice did you make? And how did it turn out? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else find the courage to act. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And maybe someone who needs to hear this message will discover it because you shared it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I share stories about real people facing impossible choices, about courage and consequence, about fighting back against injustice. Every story is a reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We all know someone facing a difficult choice, someone wondering if speaking up is worth the risk. This story might be the encouragement they need. Thank you for listening to Adriana's story. Thank you for being part of this community of people who believe that truth matters, that courage counts, that fighting for what's right is never a waste, even when the cost seems too high. Remember, you're stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and you're never fighting alone. Until next time, keep standing up, keep speaking out, keep fighting back.